Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see some new and returning faces out there. Very excited for today's session, Healing-Centered Engagement in Arts Practice, Part 2. My name is Courtney Cintron, Ingenuity's Director of Partnerships and Learning, and I'm also joined here today by an incredible colleague and Ingenuity's new Manager of Partnerships and Learning, Ariel Frost. So Ariel's here, give her a round of applause. Hi, Ariel. We are also joined here today by Karen Shifflett, whom many of you know, today's facilitator and Constellation resident at Ingenuity and Professional Learning and Evaluation Director with Changing Worlds. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, just a quick note that this morning's session is part of a series of learning sessions developed and designed by Ingenuity's Learning and Development Program residents that have come together over the last several months in a creative network to ideate, to knowledge share, and really workshop their respective learning sessions. And all of that has been in an effort to come up with innovative new ways to elevate key areas of their expertise, research, and experience as arts partners, and share it back with you all, creating a partner-to-partner learning constellation. So thank you to all of those residents for this thoughtful work and collaboration. This work will continue to be presented throughout the spring and into the summer, and then we'll start with a new cohort in the fall again with some new sessions. So today's session has been developed by Karen and has been designed for teaching artists to build community, to learn about the various ways healing can manifest in an arts residency, and share approaches to healing-centered engagement as articulated by the Flourish Agenda. So the discussion will be framed by Flourish Agenda's principles of healing-centered engagement, or CARMA, C-A-R-M-A. So in the first session, we emphasize relationships and meaning. Today's session will serve as a deeper dive into supporting students' agency and aspirations through the arts. So I'm going to hand it off. Oh, excuse me, actually, just before we move further in today's session, we'd like to also acknowledge that this virtual classroom is taking place on the stolen land of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations. And because of the Great Lakes, the land naturally became a site of travel, of healing, of trade and gathering for more than a dozen other Native tribes, and it's still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that still practice their traditions and care for the land. So as we begin this program, let's honor these ancestral grounds that we're on and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide, and also begin to rethink our own relationship with the land and its original peoples. Okay, I'm gonna pass it off to Ariel.
So, I'd also like to provide you with a content notice for today for this training program. So the content and discussion in today's session and throughout this program will necessarily engage with trauma. Some of the content may be emotionally and intellectually challenging to engage with, and we'll also do our best to make this virtual classroom a space where we can engage bravely, empathetically, and thoughtfully with challenging content. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. If you haven't already, if you would like, we invite you to update your name with your personal pronouns and your organization's name. And you can do that by hovering over your image icon and selecting the three dots. Also note that for accessibility purposes, today's session will be recorded. Additionally, handouts and slides of the session will be available to you in the chat. And closed captioning is also available and will be utilized throughout the session. And you can access the closed captioning also at the bottom of your screen. Before we get started and I hand things off to Karen, I'm just going to briefly outline some session norms for today. We've divided the session norms into a few different categories. So under equity of voice and learning, we have take space, make space. So as a participant, please be mindful of any privileged identities you may hold and help to create an environment for everyone to contribute. If you're the type of person who generally takes up a lot of space in conversations, then take a step back and listen to other people. And if you're the type of person who normally stays quiet and waits for other people to speak, feel free to bring yourself forward and let your voice be heard. We also want to speak from our own experience. So let's own our statements and views about things and not presume to be able to speak for others. And then under how we show up for ourselves and each other, we have openness to learning. And of course, you're at a learning session. So I want us all to be thinking about how we are all learners in this space. Then we have flexibility and patience. So things may not always go 100% according to plan. I definitely have had some technology gremlins today. So technology is at play, and we thank you for your grace and flexibility. And then use the chat box mindfully. So when you're using the chat box, we ask that you try to make your questions and comments as relevant to what we're talking about as possible. And this is also a confidential space. So take away lessons, but not personal content. We'll sometimes knowledge share and co-share ideas and resources in these sessions, but if anyone shares anything personal, we ask that you don't bring it out of the space. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Karen Shifflett of Changing Worlds to guide us through today's session.
Thanks so much, Ariel. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back with you for part 2 of Healing-Centered Engagement in Arts Practice. My thanks to Ingenuity for the opportunity to be part of the Constellation program, for the support of the cohort in preparing these workshops. And for those of you who I've not met, I know there's a lot of Changing Worlds affiliated folks in the audience, but I see new faces and new names. I'm Karen Shifflett. I am Changing Worlds Program Evaluation and Professional Learning Director. Changing Worlds is an arts education not-for-profit based in Chicago. We've been working with youth for 25 years, bringing integrated arts programs into schools, primarily divested communities across Chicago. This is Changing Worlds' first year embedding healing-centered engagement into our practice. So I'm really grateful and honored that we have dedicated space to learn about it, to think about it, and to do that together. So for our first session, we heard from a teaching artist, Cynthia Johnson Woodfolk, and her partner, CPS teacher, Aoife Duran, as they reflected on 2 principles of healing-centered engagement in their residency last fall, those being relationships and meaning. Today, we're going to focus on another 2 principles of healing-centered engagement, aspirations, and agency. And we're really fortunate that there are 3 teaching artists here today who are going to guide us through some small group discussions on those topics after I've shared some content that I'd like you to think about and consider. So we begin with a primer just to get our juices flowing into the topics of aspirations and agency. I just want you to take a moment, about 20 seconds, to think about the statement that's on your screen. Oppression's greatest casualty is that we can't see past it. This statement, like much of what I'm going to be sharing with you today, comes from Flourish Agenda's Healing-Centered Engagement certification course that Changing Worlds program staff, Joanne Vina, Michaela Bateman, Emma Leff, and myself recently completed through Flourish. For me, this was a powerful thing to hear during the certification coursework. I feel like it's something that I'd like you to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we go through the entire afternoon. For me, the message is that healing is about a path to liberation. Yeah, so that's something I want you to think about. Being free from oppression certainly includes justice. Justice is necessary. Justice is something we all need. But freedom from oppression means that, for me, in addition to experiencing justice, there's also space. There needs to be space to assert oneself and to be received on one's own terms. And whether that's in relation to how society structures us around race, socioeconomic class, gender, sexual identity, etc., or whether we choose to assert ourselves in completely different ways that are outside of those categories. So the intended takeaways. For the first half of our workshop, I'll introduce our teaching artists, who I'm delighted to have you meet soon. I'll quickly review what healing-centered engagement is, and then move into unpacking aspirations, again, based on some of the key takeaways from the certification coursework I thought would be most relevant for today. I'll be asking you to think about your own aspirations for yourself. And then we'll split into small groups for discussion. That first small group session will last about 20 minutes. When we reconvene, your group leaders will share some key takeaways from your conversation. Then we'll take a short break, about 5 minutes. During the second half of the workshop, our focus will shift to agency. Again, I'll share key points from the coursework, we'll have you go into slightly longer breakout rooms, because I think there's a little bit more to unpack with agency today. To aid your participation, I've prepared a handout, which I'd love Ariel or Courtney to please pop into the chat for you. It contains some of the information on the slides I'll be presenting. It'll also, thank you, it'll also include some of the small discussion guiding questions. That way you can just kind of, you can look at it and navigate it at your own discretion. You will also need something to write with. So this time around, I'd like you to do a little bit of journaling. I find that it is a great way to reflect. And so in the past, I've primarily asked you to share your feedback in the chat, which is great, so we can all benefit from people's thoughts. But this time around, I thought we'd try something different. So you're more than welcome to use the chat for feedback, but I'm really going to encourage you to journal for yourself. Last thing is you will have the PowerPoint, you will have all of the resources being shared today so that you can access them later on if you would like to. So those are the takeaways. Let's see. So that's the agenda, excuse me. So for our learning goals, they're packaged under aspirations and agency. For aspirations, I really would like us to distinguish between aspirations and goals. I think it's very easy to confuse the two. I'd like you to think about and consider how language is used to describe our aspirations. We'll talk about confined versus open language. I'd also like to have you practice writing your own aspirations using open language. And then, of course, having that dialogue with your peers on how to nurture youth aspirations. So that's the first half. For the second half, we'll talk about what praxis is. We'll talk about continuum of voice, which is a tool that I think might be really helpful in understanding a spectrum of how to engage student voice and choice in your class settings. So those are some of the things that I'd really like you to get out of our 2 hours together. Next slide, please. So now I get to the fun part. I'm delighted to introduce our 3 teaching artists. And if you wouldn't mind, thank you. 10 steps ahead as always, Ingenuity folks, spotlighting Shaniqua Brooks. Shaniqua is an artpreneur who received her master's in design in fashion, body, and garment at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago under the mentorship of Nick Cave. Founder of Weave Your Dreams into Reality Studios, she shares her stories with the world one thread at a time. She's 2022 Center for Craft Career Advancement Fellow from for the Center of Craft in Asheville, North Carolina, a featured artist for Ties That Bind in American Craft Magazine and in the Kansas City Star. She spoke about her process for weaving synthetic hair in relationship to the African-American hair experience. Notable lectures include the Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco, the Surface Design Association, and the Arlington Heights Memorial Library. She was 2014's Wingate Fellow of the Center for Craft and 2017-2018's recipient of the inaugural Young Arts Daniel Arsham Fellowship, presented by the Rittinger McLaughlin family. Welcome, Shaniqua. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Please spotlight Hani. All right, welcome Hani. Hani Mustafa is a teaching artist based in Chicago since 2013. He teaches photography and video production at Chicago public and charter schools. He helps his students showcase their work in his solo exhibitions between 2016 and 2018. In 2019, his high school students showcased their work at the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago. Their work covered issues like immigration, identity, and cultural diversity. And this year, 3 of his high school students got hired by Hardcover, a TV show produced entirely by youth for youth, and it's being aired on cable access CAN TV 19 twice a week. Welcome, Hani. Thank you so much for your leadership today. Much appreciated. All right, could you please spotlight Edmund? All right, welcome Edmund. Edmund O'Brien began improvising and writing sketch comedy at the University of Chicago. He has been a teaching artist with Changing Worlds, Looking Glass Theater, Mudlark Theater, Northlight Theater, The Second City, Victory Gardens Theater, and Storycatchers Theater, where he received the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice 2016 Volunteer of the Year Award for his work with incarcerated youth, writing and performing musicals.
Okay, my camera's not on. Oh, you should have done.
Edmund and his wife Dana performed Sheila Sisters and co-founded Kid Prov Chicago, where they teach improv at Chase Park and also online. He has also taught at the University Club of Chicago and the Center for Life and Learning. Edmund's writing credits range from You Don't Know Jack to MTV's Undressed. Somewhere in repeats, you can still hear him as the announcer for Street Smarts. Again, welcome Edmund. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership this afternoon. It's always great to have teaching artists bring your experiences to bear on the topics we're learning about so we can get some practical knowledge. And again, thank you for stepping up to engage others in this discourse. You're gonna get to know these teaching artists a little bit more once you get into your small breakout rooms. Next slide, please. So as a very quick refresher, because we spent a little bit of time on this during the first session, I just want to do a quick reminder about what healing-centered engagement is and what the 5 principles of healing-centered engagement are. So healing-centered engagement is a positive youth development approach that was developed by Dr. Sean Ginwright of Flourish Agenda and San Francisco State University in 2018. It's based on over 30 years of research and practice with young people, schools, probation departments, and social workers. Dr. Ginwright defines healing-centered engagement as a non-clinical, strengths-based approach that advances a holistic view of healing and recenters culture and identity as a central feature in personal well-being for young people, their families, and those who work with them. It differs from trauma-informed care in that it is holistic. While trauma-informed care is activated in response to specific behaviors exhibited by youth, healing-centered engagement is an approach that encompasses every facet of our interaction with youth. It is proactive, not reactive. It's also an approach that allows youth to focus on their strengths, not just on their challenges. And that's really important for nurturing well-being. In terms of the 5 principles of healing-centered engagement, they are first, culture, race, and identity, which are the values and norms that connect us to a shared identity. Agency, the individual and collective power to act, create, and change personal conditions and external systems. Relationships, the capacity to create, sustain, and grow healthy connections with others. Meaning, the profound discovery of who we are, why we are, and what purpose we were born to serve. And aspirations, the capacity to imagine, set, and accomplish goals for personal and collective livelihood and advancement. The acronym for these 5 principles is KARMA. Over this pilot year, Changing Worlds has incorporated KARMA into our curriculum outline so that teaching artists can be more intentional about bringing these principles forward in your programs. We just made this change as of January, so just a couple months ago. So for our Changing Worlds Teaching Artists, you haven't seen it yet, you will soon. And then I, as our program evaluator, have also started to ask karma-related questions on some of our surveys to start to gather information from the youth. For example, on a post survey, for a question that's related to agency, I might ask students, were you able to make meaningful choices about your art project? An example of a survey question related to aspirations might be, would you want to continue making this type of art in the future? Did you learn something you want to continue exploring? Or were you inspired by any of the artists you were introduced to? If so, tell us more. So again, just trying to tease out information from our youth in relation to these 5 principles of healing-centered engagement. So to have you start to think about aspirations, this is going to be our first journaling exercise. I'd like you to think about this quote. It comes from Pedagogy of the Oppressed, written by Paulo Freire. Take a moment to think about this quote. In order for the oppressed to be able to wage the struggle for their liberation, they must perceive the reality of oppression not as a closed world from which there's no exit, but as a limiting situation which they can transform. Take a moment to think about that in the context of aspirations and write down what this quote means to you in terms of aspirations. Take about a minute, don't overthink it, just write whatever comes to mind. Okay, I think that was roughly a minute. Let's see. We're gonna move on. If it's still sort of in the back of your mind, that's okay. That's okay. But yeah, I felt like that was something worth chewing on for a moment or two. So moving on to how Flourish Agenda, first of all, defines aspirations and the competencies we want for youth. Aspirations, again, is defined as the capacity to imagine, set, and accomplish goals for personal and collective livelihood and advancement. So what we want for the youth are for them to be able to engage in positive conversations about their future, to practice dreaming and imagining, and to use asset-driven language when talking about their personal and collective aspirations. Next slide, please. So to start to clarify what aspirations are, I thought it might be useful to juxtapose them against goals through a definition, sharing an example, etc. So we have our definition from Flourish Agenda, which differs. So I really think the emphasis for me is on the capacity side, the capacity to imagine, set, and accomplish goals, versus a goal which I'm sorry, I would just ask that everyone please stay on mute, please. Thank you. Whereas a goal, which is really about a desired result or a target or a benchmark. So again, yes, aspirations are really about hopes and dreams and possibilities. They convey the idea that we don't have to accept the current reality, that something new or different is in fact possible. A goal would be the answer to the question, where do you want to be in 5 years? A goal is something that's tactical. So just sharing an example to further differentiate, about 30 years ago, when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, I realized I was intrigued by different types of people and wanted to do something that allowed me to learn about cultures. And I also wanted to engage young people in learning about cultures in the hopes that they would become culture curious, for lack of a better term. So that was my aspiration. It was to pique curiosity and open-mindedness towards cultures around the world. How I did that was becoming a geography teacher. I taught 9th grade geography for 5 years at Josephinum Academy on the west side of Chicago. But what I thought was another way to differentiate between aspirations and goals was something that my Constellation cohort member told me. It was Mojde Stokely who offered this thought. She said, the effect or outcome of an aspiration is joy. Aspirations are about our hopes and our dreams. Fulfilling our dreams gives us joy. Whereas the effect of a goal, the fulfillment of a goal, can be a sense of accomplishment, a sense of achievement, empowerment. Both are fulfilling, both are important for our well-being. They just do that in different ways. And I thought that was a great way to help further differentiate aspirations from goals. Also want to share a little bit about where my aspiration came from, because I think that's another important thing to consider is, because it's about the capacity to imagine. So capacity, where does that come from? How does one develop the capacity to do anything? For me, I think that I wanted to explore cultures and learn about new types of people because from birth, I was exposed to different types of people. My mother is African-American, my father is Nigerian. I was born in Chicago, but moved to Nigeria at just a few months old before I was age 1, grew up there for 13 years before my family moved back here. So I think it was just that exposure to different cultures and knowing there were different types of people is where my aspiration came from to continue that, to learn more about that. And I feel like as artists, when you go into schools, you are excellent ambassadors of newness to share with kids, introducing them to new ideas, new concepts, things that maybe they hadn't considered before that may pique their interest and they can continue to explore that on their own. So yeah, just, I think it's important to not only think about what our aspirations are versus our goals, but also like, where does it come from? So moving on to how we talk about our aspirations. One of the things I thought was really important from Flourish Agenda was making a distinction in the language that we use to describe our aspirations. If I said, for example, my aspiration was to just make it out of the neighborhood, to escape violence, or that my aspiration is to end bullying in schools. These show you the things that matter to me. They show you what my values are. But they also show that I'm looking for justice from oppression. I'm seeking justice. I'm seeking to fix something that's broken or fix something that is wrong. And again, like I said earlier, justice is necessary and we need it. However, that language, that aspiration is tied to the here and now. It is not open to necessarily possibilities of the future. So how we frame our aspirations can also help give us a more hopeful or optimistic mindset if we choose to use open language to describe them. So consider the difference between these statements. I just want to make it out of the neighborhood to escape, violence versus, I want to explore the world. I want to make it out of the neighborhood to see what the world has to offer. Would be one difference. Or instead of I want to end bullying in schools, what if the aspiration is I want to reimagine a society that rewards the preservation of human dignity for everyone. Open language encourages us to focus on what we do want, not just what we don't want. And so you have this list of confined versus open language that's on this slide on page 1 of your handout, which is what I'd like you to use for the next exercise. If you could please advance to the next slide. All right, I'd like you to think about your aspirations based on what we've covered so far. Think about your aspirations and write down 1 or 2, 1 is fine, that you have for yourself. Maybe it's an aspiration about who you are as a person. Maybe it has to do with your career. You decide how you want to frame it, but I'd like you to try using open language to write your aspiration. Take about 30 minutes to think about it. I'm sorry, not 30 minutes, 30 seconds to think about it and 30 seconds to write it. So again, you're journaling for yourself. You don't need to include this in the chat unless you just really want to. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute. Okay. Can you give me an indication if you are done? Okay, mixed bag. Okay. All right, well, it's definitely something you can continue to do. And actually this next slide is another resource for taking that exercise another step forward. So in addition to practicing writing your aspirations using open language, there are also a series of questions that are in your handout on page 2 that are additional questions to really prime as an aspirational mindset. So questions about what your vision is, what kind of change you would want to make potentially, a personal inventory of what assets you have, what you feel like you would need to support you, and personal action. So there's additional questions you can ask yourself as you're crafting your aspirations and trying to get a little more granular about that. But we won't get into that today. I just wanted you to have that, and again, that's in your handout on page 2. So let's get ready to go into your small group conversation. For your group discussion, I've shared some guiding questions. I'd first like you to get to know one another, just share your name, your arts discipline, and one fun thing about yourself. And then you have a list of questions that your small group leader will walk you through. If you veer off them, that's okay. The main thing though is to be able to discuss specific activities around nurturing youth aspirations, so that hopefully you can learn something that you think might be useful for you down the road. So at this time, I believe either Courtney or Ariel is going to transition us into our breakout rooms. I think we're going to be invited, but they're going to move us. Ariel or Courtney, please go ahead and clarify.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so we're going to move into breakouts now. You'll have about 20 minutes in those rooms, but I will send 10 5-minute and 2-minute reminders. So everyone, including actually facilitators, you can go ahead and accept those invitations because I did some work on the back end to set those up.
Welcome back, everybody. I think we're all back together. Yeah, I apologize, my group. I feel like we definitely ran out of time. I feel like we probably had more to share. So I apologize that we didn't have enough space to fully flesh out all of our thoughts, but just know that our second breakout, we will have more time. We will have 35 minutes to discuss. But I want to thank everybody for sharing, for your vulnerability, for putting out there what you really think and feel and what your truth is. So I would ask the group leaders to just very briefly share out, because we're a little over time, very briefly share out some really key takeaways from your discussion. Could we please begin with Shaniqua?
Ooh, all right. We had a fantastic discussion. I'm going to try to pinpoint everyone fairly quickly. An aspiration to be authentically who you are and be true to that, and basically channel that into the students to be able to comfortably express themselves, to value oneself, and to know that the students matter and their voices matter. As far as barriers, it ranges between time, money. The barrier can also be yourself. That was an interesting thing as well. We can stand in our way and our blessings sometimes. Two things as well: passion for performing and live performance, showing them that this can happen, bringing that to the forefront, and taking it to the next level with the students of where we aspire them to be and pushing them in that direction. But and then another quick thing too, I thought Christina mentioned about the change quotes, which was targeted towards aspiration. So all the students got a square piece of cloth, and then they wrote down what they would like to change in the world on that. So that was pretty cool too. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaniqua. Thank you for that summary. I know it's hard to bring everything together, but it sounds like you guys had a really fruitful conversation. So much appreciation to you. Hani, would you mind sharing a summary from your group?
Okay, I will try to be very brief, and forgive me, my group, if I forgot anything. We will still share again after we come back from the second one. I was lucky to be with a group of amazing teaching artists from different mediums. We addressed how can we get to know the student aspiration. Seelen mentioned that dreams expressed on posters, like a protest. That was one way. Mama Edie used storytelling, different scenarios about some issues that's facing the students right now. How can we think about other possibilities by just making up stories, and then by reflecting on our experience and projecting the new possibilities on them. Amanda brought up this really very nice comment about increasing knowledge, increase possibilities. So teaching things that the student didn't know before can make them think about other things that they never thought about before. Using sounds, tones, and frequencies, recording them, listening to them differently, and choosing which frequency helped or had more impact in healing process. That was a creative exercise using the sound medium. Rick would open the discussion about what is important for the students to put something on a piece of art that will be shown publicly, and this is when the students will come up with what matters to them: family, responsible sexuality, and this will make them work willingly on the research and come up with ideas, and then find how this can be expressed in the art project. Avo mentioned that by telling the students about that they are at a better or maybe luckier situation than the teacher by starting taking their passion seriously at an early age can push them way ahead of who they are looking up to. That was very humble and also very inspiring and encouraging to let your student know that they can go further than where you are by just where they are at the learning process. Yeah, I think it's self-expression, what matters to everyone. That was the common thing with all these different mediums, whether visual or sound or all of these mediums together. Yeah.
Thank you, Hani. Appreciate it. Edmund, please share out from our group conversation.
Sure. Just a few sort of highlights, discussions for how addressing aspiration and residencies. I think hearing in some of the other groups, the idea of dreaming who we're going to become and creating art through that. Also the idea of reimagining, looking at maybe things that students are seeing as deficits currently and seeing those as more opportunities and challenges on how they can be the basis of future change. And also looking at sort of the past and how things may have been different than they are now to help students engage with how the future can also be different than they are presently. And then some barriers. So we had some interesting discussions with balancing safe space and brave space and how those are different and similar, or how one builds to the other. And also the idea of balancing how to be focused on the present and be in the moment, yet still addressing how we want to be or who we want to be in the future. So trying to find balances for that. So I think those were some highlights from our discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to everyone again for sharing what it is that you see and what you've done. And much appreciation to all of you for nurturing these aspirations creatively, because as you can see, they really are healing. They really are helping youth feel whole. So yeah, it's a really important part of, I think, the work that you do in exposing students to new possibilities, having them think about possibilities for who they want to become, and being intentional about that. So yeah, I'm glad we spent that first hour focusing on that. We're gonna take a short break, about 5 minutes. It is 2:07. Let's come back at 2:12. And we will continue on our journey and talk about agency. See you back in 5. Time flies. Okay, well, it is 2:12 and there's lots to cover. So thank you for sticking with me. Because we are running a little behind on time, I would like us to move on to the next activity. So if you wouldn't mind advancing ahead to the legacy. So welcome back, everyone. As I said, we're gonna use the second half of this session to talk about agency. So aspirations, really important in helping students think about who they are and who they wanna be. Agency is more about the capacity to become what it is you want to become, right? And so that's really important. How do we nurture that sense of voice and choice and sense of capacity to be able to do and make a difference? There's a piece, it's called The Legacy. It's a spoken word piece that was done by a high school student in the year 2019 for MLK Day. And I thought it was so powerful that I wanted to share it with you. As you watch it, I'd love for you to watch and listen for agency, how agency comes through in this piece by this young man. So please go ahead and play.
It's a feeling. You know, the one when someone might have taken the joke a bit too far and you feel it up here, but you didn't do anything out here, couldn't you feel it? It was a thumping in your chest as if you might stand for something that you would usually leave a place for under the rug. It's a tightening in your throat, as if you might let your past experience dictate what you're about to do. Friends with the capital F call it a quaking. That urge in the bottom of your soul to stand up in silence while everyone else is still rooted in their seats, as if tied by the status quo. As if being in harmony is more important than creating a ripple in the fabrics of injustice. It seems as though our minds are inundated with the thought of thinking justice. And don't get me wrong, that can make the world a better place, but it is nothing without making justice with our own two hands, making justice by marching onto the streets, making justice by doing something as simple as standing up in the meeting for worship. Market justice as a thought and not an action in abundance, and we synthesize numbness. So have we taken this day, MLK Day, as a day to relax, as a day to retreat, as a day to take the shoes off our feet, as a day to not build the house across the street, as a day to remember a man and not a legacy? And I am guilty of this as well, but if it were the legacy we fought for, our bodies would not be tied, they would be tired. Our hands would be calloused and dirty. Our knees would not be bent from the sitting, but sore from the kneeling of planting a new garden, a new normal, where we are not shy about what is wrong, but bold about what is right. Where we do not see standing as a ripple, but rather a tsunami, where we can not only pick up litter off the ground, but also ourselves from what was once an indifferent resolve, where we see justice not only up here in their mind, but also in our actions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Courtney, for playing. Pause on that. Yeah. All right. So I just want to get any reactions to that piece about agency. If you feel like there's something in that piece that resonated with you about youth agency that you'd like to share, please come off mute and speak your piece. Mama Edie, go ahead.
First of all, I thought the piece was phenomenally moving, and the images were so powerful and so nicely supported all the things that he was saying. Even the image of him being on top of a hill, looking at, comparing that to Dr. King being on the mountaintop, you know, it was, and looking at the tsunami. So, I mean, he had so much involved, the movement and the visuals and what have you. And it all spoke to, it was, I think that it spoke to that balance that was mentioned between the importance of recognizing where you are in the moment, and yet having the wherewithal to look towards the future in terms of what you could functionally do in order to get there. And I definitely got the clear indication he really went deep down inside. He went deep down inside of himself and was vulnerable enough to share where he was in the moment and where many people are in the moment. And yet to talk about the importance of standing up and being bold and taking a stand and doing something, no matter what it is, do something and allow the thinking justice to turn into acting justice, to doing justice. So I thought it was wonderful. And I definitely felt the sense of agency there. that he felt, that he encouraged in his listeners.
Thank you, Mama Edie. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like when you look at this slide from Flourish Agenda describing the competencies that we want for youth, that we want youth to speak truth about their experiences, you get that from this video, that we want youth to have the power to act, to improve negative or socially detrimental conditions. That comes through from Simon's piece. Understanding the power of collectively working on social justice issues. You know, when you hear that kind of passion from a student, you know that they believe that they can make a difference. And the call to action, his calling on everyone to do something on MLK Day, and not just relax and take a day off. You know, like the man was about service. So to honor his legacy, be of service, do something, is really, really compelling. So I feel like all these competencies are there and then some in this piece, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to share it with you. So I'm glad that you're able to see that resonate. Let's go to the next slide, please. About levels of agency. Yeah, so very, very briefly, because I do want to leave time for your small group conversation. For me, agency is such a huge, huge concept and construct that I just wanted to put out there that as you think about nurturing agency, there are levels of agency, and for you to be mindful of that. So if we're attempting to be intentional about nurturing agency, is it personal agency? Is it the agency of an individual person to know what their capacity is within themselves? Or is it relational agency, the agency in the dynamic between peers, between classmates, between teaching artist and student, between student and parent? You know, how do you nurture agency in a relationship versus something that is collective? You know, how do we think about the collective as either a classroom, and what is our agency as a class to make decisions that might show up in your class norms or in other areas, you know, or maybe it's our school community and what can we do? Maybe if you're thinking about like a social justice issue. So all that to say is there are levels of agency, and just to be mindful of what it is specifically that you're trying to nurture. You absolutely do not have to be trying to nurture all three of these, but knowing where you fit is important. Next slide, please. And also that, you know, we looked earlier at a quote from Pedagogy of the Oppressed. One of the big ideas from that book for me was just this idea of practice, that to nurture a sense of agency in individuals, that there's a series of steps that as you go through and as you do over and over again, you build more agency within yourself or within a group. So starting off with awareness, being critically conscious, thinking about your reality and questioning it, asking questions and deciding what are the important things we want to know and understand. Having dialogue, having space to talk about it, talking as a way of hearing from others, building off of each other's ideas, then actually deciding what to do and then actually doing something, thinking about what you did, how effective or ineffective it was, what you would like to do next time, and going through that cycle repeatedly, which is something that Paulo Freire calls praxis, is reflection and action, reflection and action. The more we do this for ourselves, the more agency we have, the more we engage youth in doing this, the more agency, the more agency we're able to build in them. Next slide, please. Okay, so this image comes from Barbara Bray and Kathleen McClaskey's attempt to show that there is a spectrum of agency in a class, in most class scenarios, and that there are different levels of student voice. This is in your handout, so that you can look at it more closely. But basically, it's showing a continuum of activities that are more teacher-centered versus learner-centered in the middle versus learner-driven at the top. And so during your small group conversation, I'd like you to look at this tool and think about where the activities that you do traditionally fall on this continuum. And it's a great way to be aware of, kind of where you are and think about where you might want to be, and to have something that allows you to look at what that would entail, right? So towards the more teacher-centered end of the spectrum, we've got the levels of expression and consultation. So that's asking students what they think, asking their opinions, wanting to know how they learn, so you can use that to best serve them. Or if you have a really large group of students, doing a poll to see what issues matter to them, again, just kind of getting their feedback, versus the middle range, participation and partnership, where the student gets to more co-construct activities with their teacher. The teacher is still at the helm, but the students get to, maybe design some of the activities a little bit more. And then learner-driven is really where students are self-directed and the teacher is like an advisor or a mentor. Okay, but you'll have more time in your small groups to kind of dissect this a little bit more. So within your small groups, again, you're going to be with the same small group, so we don't need to, do introductions all over again. I'd like you to talk about the activities you do that nurture youth agency, and then again to kind of do a self-analysis of where does that activity fall on the spectrum, so that you can start practicing that. Okay. So we're gonna break off into groups again, and I would ask that because of where we are in time, Courtney or Ariel, if you could give us just 30 minutes, please, for this next breakout, that would be great. So I hope you have a good conversation, and I'll see you back in 30 minutes. Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Looks like we are all here. I hope you all had a really good conversation. Just as last time, I'll ask our small group facilitators to briefly share out maybe just one highlight from your conversation, starting with Shaniqua's group.
Just one? Okay. So many notes. Everybody in our group did a great job, and we honestly just appreciate having the time to speak out on these things and what we're all doing to have agency in our spaces. But I guess one highlight, it's the first one Erica definitely mentioned, and I feel everyone in the group can attest to what she said, that goals create a space for the students to play and explore. And an example of that is she did a monsters activity, and that was the intent of making something imperfect. I feel like a lot of the students go in not saying, oh, I don't know how to draw, I don't know how to do this, I'm not good at that, but really making that the goal, right? That we are here to make mistakes and to highlight that. And the more you do, the better you become. So art is not necessarily something that you're awesome at, but it's a skill set that you have to work at to become better. So that's that.
Love it. That's fabulous. That's absolutely fabulous. Thank you. I'm sure there's so much more juicy, good stuff as well. I can see it. You're like glowing. And hopefully I get to hear more about that maybe another time, and I can share it with the group. Hani, could you share some key piece from your conversation?
We had so many things we talked about, and I'd like to share them all, but I will talk about the last part of we were talking about was how sometimes one of the challenges to have more learner-driven activities, that the group of students are not the same type of learners, that some of them follow this learner driven method, and some are waiting for what the teacher is saying, and another group go with the group. And how can this get in the way of giving everyone the opportunity to participate and make decisions? And we talked about some ways to minimize this by rotation in decision making, listening to everyone, like having turns instead of having the same student raise his or her hand every time they bring a good idea, and they want everyone to do what they say. Something else is by asking the students to to highlight something positive from each one's input that can also grow sense of respect among the group. And yeah, we ran out of time in the middle of another great way to minimize this. So more to come. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Hani. All right, Edmund.
Yes, I think one highlight that I think captured a lot of what we were discussing was William had mentioned when we were discussing agency and power, the idea of sort of decolonizing where the power comes from, sort of either historically in the room or the realities. And I think a lot of discussion was about that idea of sort of encouraging students to realize the powers that they have, and the idea of being sort of in the moment and losing ourselves in the art, allowing us to help all the different constituents, whether it be our art organization, the partners that we're with, or the students, right? What do they all want? And trying to allow what the students want to sort of be the priority. And that often will lead itself naturally to agency.
Awesome. Thank you, Edmund. So yeah, lots of great dialogue. Thank you all for participating and having such rich conversation. So I'll close out. I know we have about 1 minute. So I wanted to close out by reminding folks of what the goals were for this session. I feel like we were able to get through the bulk of what I was hoping we would talk about today. Just wish we had more time for those small group conversations. And then all of the resources are available to you. So if you want to check out that video some more, learn more about the organization that puts the video forward, Project Ready is a great organization. I strongly encourage you visiting that website to check it out. They've got lots of great resources on youth voice and choice. And then just a thank you, again, a shout out to Edmund, to Hani, to Shaniqua. Much love to you guys. Thank you so much for trying to, help us through this. It's not easy. There's so many moving pieces, and I feel like you all are just fabulous for stepping up and doing it and doing such a great job. So thank you guys. Ariel, Courtney, you guys are the dream team of PD. Love you guys. Thank you so much for all your support in making today happen. And then to the Changing Worlds team, thank you for being here and being such a great support. So I hope you all got something out of this. You'll be getting a survey soon from Ingenuity. Please complete that. And with that, I'll pass it back to Courtney and Ariel.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. And first of all, thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. And I know we were a bit rushed at the end, but we've got a lot of really great tidbits, and I encourage you to continue these conversations. And a big thank you to Karen, Shaniqua, Hani, and Edmund for facilitating these wonderful conversations. We also have a number of other events and Constellation sessions taking place this spring. So I hope you're ready for more from William Estrada, Rethinking Our Curriculum Part 2. So if you liked some of what you heard about social justice and agency, he'll be going through some of the resources and everyone will be sharing with each other. That's on May 3rd, but before that, we have Building Responsive Arts programs through co-creation and civic practice, and that's led by our residents from Fifth House. That will be April 28th. And then on May 10th, Michael Rangel will be leading us through Youth-Centered Art Making Spaces Part 1. And this is from classroom management to classroom culture. So this is another entry point into getting agency and aspirations through your students. So we're continuing this through line. Thank you all so much for coming. There is a survey in the chat, and we will see you at the next one. Bye.